What's up, everybody? I'm Josh Meek, the Uber Geek, and welcome to Pretty Dece, the weekly show about movies, comics, games, and all the pop culture in between. This is Pretty Dece Season 2, Episode 9, for the week of November 11th, 2019. And yes, today is November 11th. It is a Monday, and where I am at here in Indiana, it snowed. And it snowed a lot. In fact, as I'm recording this, it's still snowing. That's not exciting. Not exciting news. I'm definitely not one of those people who really likes snow. My wife is one of those people who loves seeing snow. Her opinion is that if it's cold outside, it might as well be snowing. I have to drive in it and walk in it, and I get cold and I get wet, and it's not my thing. So sorry if you are one of those people who absolutely adores snow. I am the complete opposite, and I absolutely hate it. So I'm hoping that it's over soon. I will say snow is fine one time a year, like Christmas Eve, to have a nice white Christmas. That's a good time for snow. Other than that, not really interested in the white stuff falling from the sky. All that being said, though, when it is this cold and nasty and wet outside and hard to drive, one good thing that's worth doing is staying inside and watching movies and playing video games. So today on Pretty Dece, we have news about both of those things. So time to dive right in. So let's kick off that theme song.
Pretty Dece, here we go. Facebook.com/Pretty Dece Show. It's time to geek out with Josh, your host.
So Ghostbusters is getting a sequel next year, a sequel/reboot, and we've talked about it in the past on Pretty Dece. And we got confirmation this week that Bill Murray is going to be a part of this film. He's officially going to be in this Ghostbusters movie. We got this confirmation from Dan Aykroyd, actually. He was speaking to the Greg Hill Show, and he talked about how the fact that we, quote, we have shot our part. So the we that he's speaking of, he says, is himself, Sigourney Weaver, Bill Murray, and Annie Potts. So Sigourney Weaver played Dana Barrett in the original film, and Annie Potts played Janine, the secretary of the Ghostbusters. And of course, Bill Murray is involved, and he plays Peter Venkman, probably the most popular of the four Ghostbusters. Dan Aykroyd, of course, plays Ray Stantz, another one of the Ghostbusters. So people were kind of questioning whether Bill Murray would be involved. He seemed like he might just be done with Ghostbusters, not wanting to come back and be involved in any further Ghostbusters properties, but clearly the script has won him over, Dan Aykroyd has won him over, something has gotten him involved, so Ghostbusters fans can definitely rejoice from that piece of news. In fact, all of the living members of the original Ghostbusters will be in this film, will be portraying their original characters. Ernie Hudson, who played Winston Zeddemore, will also be returning for this film. So the only Ghostbuster that we are missing is Harold Ramis, who played Egon Spengler. He passed away in 2014, so Egon will not be a part of the film, sadly. But the other surviving three, it's super exciting to have them involved in this movie. And I talked about this kind of being a sequel/reboot. So this film is written and directed by Jason Reitman. Jason Reitman is the son of Ivan Reitman, who is the original Ghostbusters director. And Dan Aykroyd has really high praise both for Reitman and his script. Aykroyd says that Jason wrote a beautiful, heartfelt script that takes the real DNA from the first two movies, the first two Ghostbusters, and transfers that directly to this new film. He talks about it being a handoff to a new generation of stars. So Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Ernie Hudson, they're not going to be the main stars of this film. Clearly, we've shot our part indicates that they have a fairly small piece of this film. They're kind of passing the torch, if you will, to a set of new, young Ghostbusters in this film, a new generation of Ghostbusters. One of those new generation is actually Finn Wolfhard, who plays Mike from Stranger Things, so you might be very familiar with him. Now, this new generation is notably not the Lady Ghostbusters from the 2016 Ghostbusters reboot that was then later called Ghostbusters Answer the Call, but it came out in theaters as just Ghostbusters. That film was pretty much universally hated for some reason or another. It got definitely panned by all the fans. People didn't really like it. People got very, very angry about that movie in general. And for better or worse, Jason Reitman and the rest of the people involved in Ghostbusters now are all but saying that film doesn't count, and they want to forget that film and kind of sweeping it under the rug as they take the mythology from the first two films and essentially are trying to write a Ghostbusters 3, ignoring the 2016 Ghostbusters. That's kind of a bummer for me. You know, I don't think that the 2016 Ghostbusters film was a cinematic masterpiece like maybe the original Ghostbusters is. It is not an all-time great, but it certainly was a pretty fun movie, and I thought that Melissa McCarthy, Kristen Wiig, Kate McKinnon, and Leslie Jones did a really good job as kind of carving their own path as Ghostbusters. They weren't trying to just do Ghostbusters impressions. They had their own unique, interesting characters, and it was a fun movie that I really would have liked to see them take another stab at, make a Ghostbusters 2, and really kind of, ground out some of those rough spots that first film had. Unfortunately, people really, really didn't like it, and this is now the direction that Ghostbusters is going. And I am also excited about this new direction. You know, I'm excited to have Jason Reitman writing it. I'm excited to have the original Ghostbusters back. I'm excited to have it more closely tied in with the first films. All of that sounds awesome. But I'm definitely all-inclusive when it comes to Ghostbusters. I've loved every Ghostbusters film that has come out, even the 2016 Ghostbusters Answer the Call. Nonetheless, I'm very, very excited to once again see Bill Murray portray Peter Venkman on the big screen. To say it's been long awaited is an understatement, but we got our first episode of Rick and Morty in over 2 years this weekend. It was the first episode in season 4. There are 10 total episodes in season 4. Unfortunately, we're only going to get 5 of them in this first chunk. Then it'll take a break again and then back for another 5 more. So Rick and Morty continues to be a show that takes a while to produce, clearly. A 2-year gap between seasons. Now, of course, they have a running order for multiple seasons in a row, so hopefully, ideally, we don't have 2-year gaps or over 2-year gaps between each season. But the gap here in season 4, I think, is a good indication that we're still going to wait some time between these seasons because they're complicated to animate and, of course, complicated to write. So I think that the process just takes a long time. Nonetheless, this episode, the first of season 4, is kind of a reset in many ways. It brings us back to basically as tried and true of a classic Rick and Morty formula as you can get. Checking a lot of the boxes that you would come to expect from a Rick and Morty episode. Rick needs to go on an adventure. He doesn't explain things fully to Morty. They introduce some crazy alien space concept. Morty gets kind of wrapped up in it, sort of goes off the deep end with this concept, and then Rick has to come and save the day. It is definitely like exactly what you expect from Rick and Morty, and that's not bad. That's not really a bad thing. So, diving in, the episode is called Edge of Tomorty, Rick, Die, Repeat, which you might know is a reference to Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat, which is I guess first it was a manga that then became a Hollywood film. Basically, it's Groundhog Day, but kind of action-oriented. So the character in Edge of Tomorrow dies repeatedly and relives the same sequence over and over again. And in this episode, that happens to Rick. He dies over and over again and keeps getting reborn as clones. And the inverse of that is that Morty has a crystal that shows him how he's going to die, kind of all the possible ways that he's going to die. And he zeroes in on one death that he wants to seek out. So he does everything that he can to kind of use that to guide his path. So if he turns left and he doesn't see that death anymore, well, then he'll turn right, and he sees it, he'll go right. So he just follows exactly what the crystal says, which is hilarious and really great. It is a super simple, easy to understand concept taken to its logical and ridiculous conclusion. And it's great. It shows really how Morty is exactly like Rick. He is completely motivated by a means to an end. He's going to get to that particular death outcome and doesn't care about other people, doesn't care about his family, doesn't care what other people need or want. He spends most of this episode not resurrecting Rick because he's following his crystal and he's on his own little quest. So it's interesting that they are really more alike than probably either of them would want to admit, which is very, very intentional. Now, since the last Rick and Morty episodes, kind of as season 3 was airing, and then of course in the gap we've had, it's kind of become cool to hate on Rick and Morty, and especially to hate Rick and Morty fans. There's the joke that kind of keeps popping up that, oh, you have to have a really high IQ to like Rick and Morty, and oh, Rick and Morty's only for like smart people, and said very mockingly, right? And I think that'll come from anything that is popular. It's kind of the Fortnite effect, right? Something that is genuinely good, a well-made video game in the case of Fortnite, a very well-made show in the case of Rick and Morty, gets ridiculously popular, becomes the biggest thing in the world, becomes the most popular show that is running. There's going to be some backlash on it where people want to be kind of hipster about something and not like the thing that is cool. And I think the show is well aware of that. I think that Rick and Morty and the creators of Rick and Morty and Adult Swim know the reception that kind of has started to come about because of Rick and Morty. At the end of the episode, they advertise a podcast that's going to come out. That's kind of creator commentary to go along with the episodes is what it sounds like. And one of the taglines for the podcast is, "All IQs welcome," which is a great little nod at that kind of reception. I will say, if you've been hearing kind of that sentiment about Rick and Morty on the internet, ignore it. It's still a really, really good show. It's still a incredibly well-written show. They do so much right in a single episode. The amount of like ridiculously inventive premises that they show you for like half a second and then move on. Other entire series could be based on like a few seconds of this episode. So many like really clever things that you wouldn't have necessarily thought of, but do make sense. Like I said, kind of the logical, ridiculous conclusion is a perfect way to put that. They take what is, some obvious premises. Rick dies and gets born again as a clone over and over again. He has this Groundhog Day type experience, but they turn that on its head by making him come back as various odd creatures, by getting abducted by a fascist Morty, for example. And then speaking of the fascist Morty, there's definitely some baked-in kind of meta commentary in full effect there. Fascist Morty doesn't like it when things get too political, and he just wants to go on classic adventures like they used to. And I think that's creator Dan Harmon speaking directly to the fans that hold that exact opinion, that don't want the show to get political, that don't want the show to be preachy or try to have a point. They just want to go on fun Rick and Morty adventures, and I think that's Dan and the creators kind of giving a middle finger to that type of fan, telling them we're going to make the show that we want to make, while at the same time kind of doing a little bit of a reset here in this season. So they're clearly hinting at we're gonna make the show we want to make. Sometimes things are gonna be in depth, and we're going to have a message. Sometimes they're going to be fun adventures. And the end of the episode is them very clearly stating, like, we're just going to do what we want. We're just going to do whatever we want. We're going to have fun. That's the whole point of this. And it is kind of a reset button, but also a cool point going forward. So we do get 5 episodes of Rick and Morty here so far for season 4. The next one is next weekend. I'm very excited. I'm excited to see kind of where they go, what this season holds, and if they get into some bigger, crazier shenanigans than before and kind of build up to that, or if we just tell interesting, unique premises now with Rick and Morty and kind of see where that takes us. So I'm excited. I'm back on the ride, and I'm definitely super enjoying what I've seen thus far. And our last piece of news for this week is that Shuhei Yoshida is no longer the president of Sony Computer Entertainment Worldwide Studios. So he's no longer kind of the head of Sony and their kind of PlayStation brand. He'd been president since 2008. And from my understanding of kind of knowing him and kind of what he's done and hearing him on stage, like at E3 and other conferences like that, hearing him talk on shows and interviews, I think that Shuhei has been a really great president. He seems to really understand games. He really seems like he's a gamer first, and kind of it comes from maybe a developer mindset, and then he's not just pure business like you might expect someone in that role to be. Nonetheless, he is no longer going to be president. We'll talk about his new role in just a second. But he's being replaced by Herman Hulst, who is, you might not have heard the name, is the co-founder of Guerrilla Games. Guerrilla Games, they're the developers behind Killzone. They made all the Killzone games, and most recently have found incredible success with Horizon Zero Dawn. So, of course, making awesome games on the PlayStation platform, and he's getting kind of transferred over to the mothership, essentially. So Herman Hulst taking over as president of Sony Computer Entertainment Worldwide Studios. Shuhei Yoshida is going to be leaving to head up a new initiative that is going to, quote, nurture independent developers. So they kind of talk a bit about that role and kind of the passion that he has for independent development and being the lifeblood of gaming and of the PlayStation. And up until now, Sony, lately, the past several years on the PS4, Sony has had a crazy good first-party games lineup. They've put together a ton of games that are super worth playing, that are compelling reasons to own a PlayStation. As we rapidly are in a time where most of the big games are kind of everywhere, that's the thing that's going to set a platform apart, is having games that are unique to that platform that I can't play elsewhere. You look at a company like Microsoft, and they're not as focused on that. They kind of just want games to be the thing, and they don't really care what platform you play it on, whether you're streaming it or playing it on an Xbox, or, in their case, playing it on the Switch or playing it on PS4 if it's Minecraft. PS4, seems to really have been nurturing that kind of first-party gaming culture, and they've really kind of had some really good fruits of those efforts. So maybe Shuhei leaving to kind of go work on nurturing these independent developer relationships will continue to give those awesome first-party games a wonderful home in the world of PlayStation. That might be kind of where he wants to go, maybe because he does have that passion as kind of games first. He wants to go have a more hands-on kind of role when it comes to independent developers. So that could be, and also, someone like Herman Hulst stepping into that role, coming from the development side, coming from the studio, making games, I would imagine is going to help him also guide the PlayStation brand, guide Worldwide Studios, in a way that makes them very easy to work with, makes them be very accepting of developers and their timelines and their needs and kind of help them along. So I think that he probably is a pretty great choice as someone to kind of step in that role. Like I said, I don't know a ton about him personally, but looking at his studio, that's been very successful in the games that have been produced. I think that's a super, super cool move. This is big changes, though, however. Anytime you're replacing a president of an organization this large, it's some big, big moves, especially when you're not really promoting someone who was kind of next in line for the role. I think Herman Hulst is kind of, obviously he's within the Sony family, working at Guerrilla Games, but he wasn't like second in command. He wasn't already working at Worldwide Studios. So maybe kind of an unexpected choice there. And certainly big moves leading into the launch of the PlayStation 5. One has to wonder if the PS5 kind of being so close around the corner is going to be intimidating for someone like Hulst coming in and taking over this role, or if he sees like, hey, I can really step in and have a big impact and get my hands dirty very, very quickly, because it's going to be pretty wild pretty soon for the PlayStation brand and kind of all of Sony. So yes, while they have had some kind of big moves leading into the PS5, hopefully they have now the right people in the job, and I'm really excited to find out exactly what Shuhei Yoshida is doing and kind of what his new role is, and especially what the fruits of those efforts are going to be. So that's going to do it for Pretty Dece for this week. Thank you very much for joining me. Some fun stuff there to talk about, diving into Rick and Morty. Of course, Ghostbusters coming back. Lots of fun stuff going on. If you want to check out both this episode and all the past episodes, you can head over to the website. That's prettydeceshow.com. Of course, all the episodes also go up on YouTube if you prefer checking it out there. youtube.com/prettydece. And of course, you can find me on social media. Hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Pretty Dece Show. Let me know what you think about this episode, or just what you're thinking about in general when it comes to pop culture. I'd love to hear from you.